The summer of 1943. The steppe of Kursk shimmered under a merciless sun, the air trembling above fields of rye and dust. Across the plains of southern Russia, engines idled in endless rows. Men stood beside armored giants of steel and oil, waiting for the command that would unleash one of the greatest battles of the Second World War. Operation Citadel was ready to begin, the German attempt to restore the initiative lost at Stalingrad. Among the officers preparing for the assault stood a man whose career embodied the paradox of military talent within a collapsing system: Joachim Peiper, commander of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment of the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division. Only 28 years old, he had already earned a reputation as both a daring field officer and a strict disciplinarian. His unit was elite, hardened by years on the Eastern Front, equipped with Tigers and Panthers, the pride of German armor. For Peiper and his men, Kursk was more than another operation. It was a final gamble. The front stretched over hundreds of kilometers, and behind Soviet lines waited a defensive fortress of trenches, mines, and anti-tank guns. As dawn broke on July 5th, the horizon erupted in thunder. Tanks advanced in columns, crushing soil and wire, while artillery painted the fields with flame. The atmosphere was mechanical and vast, the scale of total war. If stories like this draw you in, the real struggles behind the names and dates, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Ahead are more journeys through the defining moments of our shared history. Operation Citadel began with confidence. The Wehrmacht believed that concentrated armored power could split Soviet lines, trapping enemy forces in the salient. Peiper's regiment, within the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, moved north toward Prokhorovka, one of the operation's focal points. Progress came slowly. Soviet minefields, dense artillery fire, and well-prepared counterattacks stalled the advance. For Peiper, the experience tested every facet of command. His coordination between tanks and mechanized infantry was textbook in precision. Yet no amount of skill could offset the overwhelming Soviet depth. 5 defensive belts, each reinforced with armor and anti-tank guns. The fighting became a grinding contest of endurance. By mid-July, it was clear the offensive had failed. The Red Army, under commanders like Rokossovsky and Vatutin, launched massive counterblows. German forces began to withdraw. The dream of regaining initiative in the east evaporated in the dust of Kursk. Still, Peiper's career advanced. His composure under pressure drew attention within the SS hierarchy. After Kursk, his division withdrew to Italy for reorganization. The front had shifted, but the pattern was unchanged: retreat, regroup, and resist. For many German officers, the question was no longer how to win, but how long to hold out. In the autumn of 1943, the Leibstandarte Division was sent to northern Italy. There, in the wake of Italy's armistice with the Allies, German units were tasked with disarming former partners and securing vital supply routes through the Alps. The landscape changed, from the open steppes to narrow valleys and mountain villages. For Peiper's regiment, this was a different kind of war. Fewer tanks, more patrols, more logistics. Accounts from the period describe Peiper as energetic, precise, and relentless in his expectations. He valued mobility and discipline, traits that reflected the German military ethos of control amid chaos. The Italian months passed with constant movement, road security, anti-partisan sweeps, and the ever-present anxiety of Allied landings further south. By early 1944, the division moved again, this time to France. Here the men rested, trained, and awaited the next storm. When the Allies landed in Normandy in June, the Leibstandarte stood ready in Belgium, equipped with new armored vehicles and reorganized for mobile warfare. Peiper was promoted to SS Standartenführer, commanding his regiment as the Western Front opened in full. Though the division saw action only late in the Normandy campaign, Peiper understood that Germany's strategic window was closing. The Allies had air superiority, overwhelming industry, and momentum. Still, Hitler demanded one final counterstroke, a blow that might divide the Allies and force negotiation. Its name would soon echo across history: the Ardennes Offensive, December 1944. The Ardennes forest lay silent beneath a heavy curtain of snow. On the morning of the 16th, that silence broke. The German army launched its final great offensive in the west, a surprise attack through the wooded hills of Belgium and Luxembourg. Peiper's regiment, part of the 1st SS Panzer Division, formed the spearhead of Kampfgruppe Peiper, the unit tasked with driving all the way to the Meuse River. For the first 48 hours, the advance was astonishing. American lines were thin, unprepared for such a strike. Town after town fell to Peiper's column: Hansfeld, Bullingen, Stavelot. Tanks rolled through villages where civilians watched in disbelief. Yet the pace soon slowed. Fuel shortages crippled movement. The narrow Ardennes roads clogged with traffic. Allied engineers blew bridges, and resistance stiffened. By December 21st, Peiper's force was isolated deep behind enemy lines, encircled and cut off from supply. The snow deepened, the air attacks intensified. Peiper's remaining tanks ran dry, abandoned in the woods. On Christmas Eve, he gave the order to destroy the vehicles and move out on foot. After days of fighting withdrawal, a fraction of his men reached German positions. The offensive, soon known as the Battle of the Bulge, collapsed. The failure sealed Germany's fate. The Reich's last reserves were spent. For Peiper, it marked the end of battlefield command. Within months, the war itself would be over. In May 1945, Peiper surrendered to U.S. forces in Bavaria. Captivity brought interrogation, and later, trial. The post-war tribunals sought to establish accountability across all levels of command. Peiper was among those charged at Dachau, his name tied to wartime actions in Belgium. The trials were complex, influenced by the political atmosphere of early occupation. Sentenced initially to death, his penalty was later commuted to life imprisonment and then to time served. Peiper spent over a decade in prison before his release in 1956. In the following years, he led a private existence, translating technical literature and avoiding public attention. Yet his past continued to shadow him. In post-war Germany, debates about responsibility, obedience, and moral choice grew louder. Historians studied figures like Peiper not as villains or heroes, but as reflections of a generation shaped by total war and ideology. His story illustrates the uneasy intersection of personal competence and political allegiance, how professional soldiers found themselves instruments of an ideology far beyond their control. The life of Joachim Peiper is not easily summarized. He was a product of his time, trained for modern mechanized war, bound by loyalty, and ultimately consumed by the collapse of the system he served. His trajectory, from the armored fields of Kursk to the snow-laden forests of the Ardennes, mirrored the rise and disintegration of the German war effort itself. To understand Peiper's story is to confront the larger history of the 20th century, a period when technology magnified both human brilliance and destruction. The tank battles, the logistics, the strategies were all manifestations of a world transformed by industrial might. But beneath them lay individuals, bound by circumstance, belief, and duty. Today, his name endures not for glory, but as a reminder of the fine line between professionalism and fanaticism, between discipline and blind faith. History does not absolve, it records. And in that record lies the warning that progress without reflection can lead again to ruin. The echoes of those armored engines across the fields of Kursk and the forests of the Ardennes still resonate, not as celebration, but as lessons carved into time. If you found this exploration meaningful, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More stories of history's turning points are on the way. Each one reminds us that behind every battle are choices, consequences, and the fragile threads that connect past and present.